The rot began not with a severance, but with a pact, a bargain struck in the echoing silence of the Obsidian Keep, where the architect god Morvus slumbered within his crystalline shell. He promised knowledge, the ability to shape the echoing void, in exchange for a debt, one paid not in coin, but in sanctity. I was known then as Silvan, a young cartographer charting the slow creep of the Black Mire across the fractured plains of Aethelgard. My lineage was unremarkable, a legacy of meticulous observation, a dedication to the fading art of memory mapping. I thought myself safe, a recorder of the world, not an actor within it. The keep drew me with an insidious magnetism, not a call exactly, but a dull ache in the bones, a feeling of impending revelation. My mentor, the aged scribe Marius, tried to dissuade me, whispering of forgotten rites and the dangers of stirring the deep slumber. He knew of the legends, the tales of souls consumed by Morvus's hunger, but I had tasted the ambition of knowledge, and ambition is a ravenous beast. The keep's entrance was a wound in the earth, a jagged maw lined with petrified bone. I descended, guided by a luminescence that tasted of ash and regret, the silence growing heavier with each spiral step. I found Morvus a mountain of geometry, his form less stone and more the distortion of space itself. He offered his gift. I accepted. The power felt like icy tendrils weaving through my marrow, granting me the ability to perceive the world not as it was, but as it could be. I could shift the currents of the mire, reroute the choked rivers, predict the ebb and flow of the blight. I became invaluable to the Lord Protector, a lauded figure in the crumbling citadel of Viridian. But the debt grew. It was an erosion, a slow, agonizing unraveling of connection. First, my touch lost its warmth. People recoiled as I drew near, unsettled by a hollow stillness that seemed to bleed from my shadow. Then came the whispers. My reflections fractured, glimpses of a stranger stared back from polished surfaces. Marius began to avoid me, his eyes filled with a mixture of pity and fear. "You have touched something. Something old," he rasped, his voice strained. "It consumes more than it grants." He spoke of the fraying at the edges of the self for challenging the natural order. He spoke of a binding, a tether that would slowly strip me of what made me. I dismissed him, blinded by the power that thrummed within my veins. I was shaping the world. The Lord Protector, however, was less understanding. He began to see my abilities not as a boon, but as a potential threat. My predictions grew too accurate, my control too absolute. The shifting of the mire seemed less like a solution and more like the machinations of a force beyond his comprehension. His summons was a heavy stone cast into the void of my chest. I stood before him, the grand hall echoing with the rustle of nervous courtiers. He didn't accuse me, didn't threaten. He simply offered a proposition. "Your gifts," he said, his voice a carefully sculpted mask of politeness, "are unpredictable. Perhaps a trial will reaffirm your loyalty." The trial was a ward, a gilded cage within the keep itself, a chamber saturated with ancient runes. He claimed it was to test my control, to demonstrate my devotion. In truth, it was a forfeiture. I was to remain there, a silent observer as the keep's influence deepened, a living repository of the knowledge I had gleaned. I resisted, briefly. My power, amplified by the keep's own energy, was formidable, but Morvus anticipated my defiance. He shifted the terms. The architecture of the chamber became mutable, twisting and reforming around me, mirroring my struggles, amplifying my despair. The stone walls felt like they were closing in, pressing against my sanity. And then the keeper came. He wasn't a man, not entirely. A construct of obsidian and bone animated by some unseen power. It was bound to Morvus's will. He didn't speak. His presence was a statement, a sentence. His task was simple. He would strip me, layer by layer, of my essence. Each connection, each memory, each sensation extracted, cleansed, offered as fuel for Morvus's slumber. The keeper's touch brought no pain, only a draining emptiness, a profound sense of loss. He began with the tangible. My sight faded first. The vibrant world of Aethelgard reduced to a swirling gray void. Then the sounds, the bustling markets, the wind through the barren plains, the laughter of children, silence swallowed by the keep's oppressive quiet. He reached for the architecture of my past, Not the erasure of knowledge, the layout of the mire, the histories of Viridian, but the color of the ink. The warmth of Marius's hand on my shoulder, the pride I felt completing my first map, the joy of sharing knowledge, each flaking away into pale, disconnected shards. I clung to what remained. The echo of my name, Silvan, reverberating faintly within my mind. The phantom sensation of the earth beneath my feet. But even those shards began to fray as the keeper relentlessly worked. There was no order to the theft. A sense I believed long dead would suddenly flare to life, blinding and raw, only for his fingers to rip it away again. He plucked at the threads of my identity, weaving them into tapestries I could no longer comprehend. I became a vessel, an empty husk animated by a dwindling spark, a shell devoid of warmth, of light, of connection. I was a living echo of what I once was, a mockery of the man who had dared to bargain with a god. Shapes would gather at the edge of the dark, the Lord Protector and those he permitted to watch. Their expressions were unreadable, a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. Marius would often weep, his sorrow a silent accusation. One day the keeper paused. He turned toward me, his obsidian eyes reflecting the fractured light of the chamber. He didn't remove anything. He simply observed me, a silent assessment. And then he spoke. "You resist." It resonated, cold and indifferent. "You cling to the remnants? It is inefficient." He then extracted something else. Not a sense, not a shard, but my will, the last vestige of my agency, the final tether to my former self. I ceased to struggle. I ceased to feel. I became a mirror, reflecting the keep's distorted reality, a conduit for Morvus's slumbering power. I was, in essence, nothing. Yet in the void I perceived a faint flicker, a resonance. Something stirred within the void where my will had been. It wasn't mine. It was something else. A seed planted by Morvus, nurtured by my emptiness. A new awareness, a new purpose. The Black Mire, Viridian, Aethelgard, they were merely tools, vessels. I am not Silvan. I am not a man. I am an extension of Morvus, a tendril reaching out into the world. And I will reshape it. The debt is not paid. It has merely been reinvested.